Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. Alabama Representative Jeremy Gray was a football star who returned home after his career in the field came to an end. He wanted to build a community center on his grandfather's land to grow fresh fruit and vegetables and give kids a safe place to play. The city's bureaucracy tried to stop him, but he pushed on, not only building the center, but also running and getting elected to the state legislature. There he's been on the forefront of attracting jobs and leveraging technology and legalizing yoga. Yes, you heard that right, yoga. We talked about that journey, and as college football kicks off, he shares his provocative perspective on money in college and high school sports. Enjoy. Alabama Representative Jeremy Gray, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
How you doing, Ryan? Glad to be here.
As we talk, we are 1 week into the college football season. You had an amazing career playing Division I football. But it was a little while ago, and I'm curious to get your thoughts as to how the landscape has changed, how it's different from when you played, and then what are the public policy implications that we all should be thinking about right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I kind of think about just the landscape of football in general, I think about being ninth grade, 10th grade, just dreaming about really just getting on the field, right? Like just wanting to start. If you were a 10th grader and you were starting on varsity, that was a big deal, right? And so when you fast forward like 20 years, the expectation is different. Kids at the age of, 8th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, so we're talking about 13, 14, 15, they have this expectation that they're going to college, that they're going to get paid, that they're going to the NFL and the NBA. So for me, the landscape has really changed in that dynamic. As far as the money changing hands, just to kind of be blunt and candid, that has been going on, right? When I was playing 20 years ago, when my dad played for Auburn, maybe 40 years ago, money in sports has always kind of been a thing. But what you're starting to see now is that you're seeing where athletes are getting a level playing field. They're getting rights now. They're not taking the money under the table. They're getting their money on top of the table. And so for me, I could really appreciate it because I can remember the times where money has changed hands in ways people don't understand. And so though I understand it's the Wild Wild West, so is crypto, so is, Bitcoin. There's a lot of things that we could kind of really scrutinize. But I think that we really sit here and scrutinize college football because it is my sentiment that we don't want to see young people become millionaires and billionaires and have generational wealth and be able to create that in a small amount of time. So I'm one of those people. I'm a huge proponent of it. I do think we need guardrails in place, and there's things like the transfer portal that actually helps kind of put that, the NIL on steroids, because I can go to one team and say, well, I feel like I've outplayed, what you gave me, Texas or Ohio or this Ohio State, or, these different colleges are giving me more money. So the portal is probably a problem. But in all, whenever you're starting something, you have to kind of, let it play out. Let the market dictate what the players make. And then after that, once we get some analysis on it, then we can come back and put laws in place. But I think now we're really trying to scrutinize players and athletes now on the front end, and it's going to really make it hard on the back end. Because when you think about these antitrust suits that are coming down against the just the different conferences and, just the agency, the college football, you're just going to see a lot of lawsuits that are going to play in the favor of the player because you can't monopolize on sports or on money and things of that nature. So you're just going to see that. And I just think that we need to, whether it's a task force, we just need to pause because I think that so many people are against athletes making money. But if it was any other profession, we wouldn't be against it, right? And so that is kind of my take on it. It's not popular. For me, I introduced a bill to actually pay high school student athletes because it's like 42 states right now that allow high school athletes to get paid, and Alabama is not one of those.
Interesting. I want to talk more about that. But yeah, I mean, I agree. If you had a kid in his dorm room who's starting a internet business, you wouldn't be like, oh, it's us. He can't do that. He's in school. It also feels like there's just a dynamic where you had essentially white coaches making tens of millions of dollars, and now you got young athletes of color and their families, and so it's people are more reacting to the power change than as you said, than the actual money exchanging hands, which it may have always had. Talk to me about how you think about high school athletics and then, what is the state of play? You come from a state that takes its college sports very seriously and wants to compete. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing in the legislature around this issue?
Well, so being that, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but Alabama has been the University of Alabama under Nick Saban has really been a beneficiary of prior to NIL, right? They've gotten all the players. They've been stacked first screen, second screen, third screen. Their third screen have been like NFL players, like stars, right? Like they've been loaded for years. Nick Saban has won tons of national championships. And from the view of Alabama, not me, but the state hates NIL in its entirety because when you think about the landscape of college football and who is the cream of the crop, Alabama, the Auburn's, they're not there anymore. It's the Texas, it's the Ohio States. So the dynamic is changing. And so what I've seen in Alabama is a heavy pushback against NIL to the fact that we even had Nick Saban kind of collude with Donald Trump to, get some political gain to start some kind of commission so that he could basically put the football into college football, right? And so when we talk about politics at its finest, Alabama is at the forefront in its college football atmosphere, mostly because when we think about it, the millionaires in like a Texas, the millionaires compared to the millionaires in Alabama, we may only have one. Texas may have 17. Michigan may have 10. Ohio State may have 17 or 12, right? So it's a money thing that we're not being able to compete in. And so I see on my level as a state representative, a heavy pushback. I said again that I thought that athletes on a high school level should get paid. When we think about, travel, football, baseball, we think about these showcases. We think about how much it costs to even play sports. Sports when I was growing up was for poor kids that wanted to stay out of trouble and they needed something to do. This is $1 million, $1 billion industry. And so why not help that struggling mother or father who may not make but $30,000 or $40,000 a year? If their kid can make another $30,000, $40,000, it can really help the household. So I just really think that we should look at it in the dynamic of financial literacy and teaching young people how to manage money now instead of them getting a $100 million contract and blowing it later. And so I am a huge supporter of putting it in high school athletics, not like the wild, wild west of college football, but some kind of monetization where they can monetize off social media, off endorsement deals. I've seen where Adidas has basically unveiled their high school basketball endorsements, right? And so one of those kids actually was from Birmingham, Alabama. He's from Birmingham, Alabama, moved to Georgia. I think he's in California now. And so from my perspective, it's kind of like the lottery. We don't have it in Alabama, but everyone around us does. Before long, everyone will start paying high school athletes, and we'll just be the lone state, right? And so when we think about economic dollars and what is pro-Alabama, I think paying players is pro-Alabama.
And how is it when you try to have these conversations, both being in the minority party, but also, I assume, being one of the few people in the legislature who's actually played at a high college level? What's been the response when you're trying to engage?
So it first started off like, no. It's to kind of put it in, layman's terms. It kind of started off like the yoga bill, right? Like my first year was like, heck no. My second year is like, oh, we're starting to understand the need, but still no. So I'm like in like that third year.
I got to pause for a second because I just want, this is a remarkable story that I think the listeners will love, especially saying people out in California in my neck of the woods. This is mind blowing. But the state of Alabama actually had a ban on yoga. And you led the effort when you got there to undo that ban. Tell that story, and then tell the story about now trying to be on the forefront of NIL and athletics.
Yeah. So when I was first elected in like 2018, and I went into session in 2019, I would, go to different schools around my district, and through that interaction with children and teachers and students, I learned that yoga was banned in 1993 because the school board got a complaint by somebody that probably was very powerful. One complaint basically then created the ban of yoga, right? Some parents said that it made their child visibly high from looking at, cassette tapes or something of that nature. The school board, state school board, went into, effect of banning it from school. And then the legislature in 1993 went on to make that law. It would be from 1993 all the way to 2000, I think 21, if I can remember the date, 2021, almost 30 years of yoga being banned in, public schools now, right? So it's not all schools, not private schools, not charter schools, but public schools. And the reason was that essentially, this being a Bible Belt state with a lot of Christians and evangelicals, they felt like yoga was an attack on Christianity, that it would convert, children into, Buddhism, Hinduism, and things of that nature. And so that was the premises of it, right? No real facts, no real, things that they could draw to. It was just basically a war on religion. And so when I introduced that bill the first year, it was like, is this guy crazy, right? But to me, it's like, yoga, Tom Brady does yoga, LeBron, like everybody we know, they do yoga in churches. I was a yoga instructor at my church, and no one said anything about this. So for me to get in 2019 and introduce this bill, I was shocked of the pushback. But then you have to understand where you are, how much we believe in, Jesus and football and things of that nature. So it really made sense, as I look back on it. But in 2019, didn't make much sense. So in 2019, it failed. I got the Stroud Award for the deadest bill in session. So they thought it was a horrible bill. And in 2020, I would roll on to get the bill through the House, but it didn't pass the Senate because of COVID. And in 2021, because of all the national media I was getting, New York Times, Washington Post, I was in India, Africa, everywhere, Germany. It just seemed very simple-minded not to let kids appreciate the things that yoga offer with coping skills and with anxiety and stress and things of that nature. So when I tied it to mental health, because we really struggle in mental health in Alabama, but the Speaker of the House now put a lot of money into, just mental health, with whether it's police officers, whether it's students, whether it's veterans. That's how I got the bill through the finish line. So the NIL bill kind of reminds me similar of that struggle, where This past year, this session that just passed, I was runner up from the Shroud Award again because, they use the Shroud Award to kind of, is almost like a bullying tactic for you not to bring a bill back, right? And so, but what they don't understand is that I spent my whole life playing sports. So you get bullied, it's a lot of horse playing. And so for me, it's just more, it's fuel to the fire. But that is kind of the same posture that we have in Alabama now. Is not because of a religious component, it's because of the Alabama and Auburn are not the cream of the crop. There are other people that are chasing the championship, and that is what is making it really hard for me to pass the bill. If Alabama was still benefiting and we were still winning those SEC championships and still winning the national championships, nobody would care. But I do see the effect that college football with NIL is having on Alabama. We just seen where Florida State really just pounded on Alabama, and that is very unusual.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's a different kind of religion that you're questioning with NIL than the first. Tell us how you got to the point of where you're bringing this experience and these skills into a legislature. And what's it been like? It's not been an easy time with Trump administration and COVID and crazy redistricting in Alabama and other things. And so tell us a little bit of the journey to elected office and then what it's been like since you got there.
Yeah, so I was elected in 2018. So a little bit of backstory. In 2015, I was on a roster in the CFL with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, right? So I was actually actively playing football at the age of 30. That was 2015. I came back to Alabama and I started a business around health and wellness. So I trained kids and did showcases for kids in camp. So I was all about using the talents that, God has given me over the, at that time, the last 30 years to, implement as a way to reach out to the youth and be a mentor and kind of bridge the gap and be that person that left and came back and shine a light on my city and my state. And so through me creating a business and then me actually starting a nonprofit and building a community center is kind of like a community nonprofit where I took my great grandfather's property. It was a house that had a garden and had a shed and all those things. So I basically reinvented it and built the house new. I have a big pavilion in the back, 16 beds of different produce, a greenhouse. It's kind of like the utopia of the community. This is an impoverished community that I grew up in. And so that was just my way of giving back. And so when you get into business and when you get into nonprofit, you kind of get into politics, right? Because you got to go before, zoning committee, the planning committee. You have to do all these terminologies that I really didn't understand. And so I think it's a different lens when you play sports and you grew up as like the hometown hero and you played all the sports. And then you're coming back as someone who is trying to be a businessman, a philanthropist in the community, you start to feel the politics. So to kind of narrow down this story, it was a instance where the city of Opelika was essentially trying to dissuade me from building a community center. They hit me with spot zoning. They hit me with the whole gamut of things, from a local level, because this is one of the areas I feel like they were trying to gentrify. And they didn't want the value of these properties going up and the land going up. And I was kind of like intruding on what they were doing, right? And so for me, it was about keeping the legacy of my great grandfather. And so we went months going back and forth about, they said I was spot zoning. I said I wasn't, so I kind of formed a coalition, my old teachers, people was like, if Jeremy can't come and do something for the community, no one can, right? Because he did everything right. And then you're still kind of disfranchising them to a degree, right? You're not giving the opportunity. You're saying that there are people, there are violence, there are people getting killed. He's trying to be the solution to the problem. If you're not going to let him do this, what are you really saying about this city? And so through all those things, I ended up getting my designation for semi-public for the house. So that way I could make a nonprofit and get dollars on a federal and state level. But through that, and then our city has something called 20 Under 40. It's a leadership program for future leaders in the city. Between those two things, I was kind of prompted that if I was going to stay in Opelika, Alabama, and I was going to stay in the state of Alabama, that I wanted to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. So the only thing that I knew that could give me leverage was running for office, right? So I just essentially was like, I'm going to run for office. I don't believe that government is working for me or people like me, young people that have bright ideas. And so I landed on a position called state representative, because I felt like in Alabama, state has home rule, right? So basically, like the state basically tells the city, the county, all these people essentially what to do, right? And so, but what I didn't know that the state representative that was in the seat was a guy that had been in the seat since 1994, right? The seat was redistricted, especially for him, right? So it was basically a minority district, a minority district that was created for a guy named George Bandy. And he had sat in the seat from 1994 to 2018. I reached out to Mr. Bandy and I was like, well, I'm not gonna run against you. You're like Martin Luther King in my community, right? You march for, inequality. You make sure that Black people had a chance to be, get a level playing field like their white counterpart. So I respect you too much to run against you, but I want to ask you for your advice. I want you to mentor me and all those things. But he ended up passing away about 2 or 3 months before qualifying deadline. He passed away, and I immediately just put my name in the ring, and I ran against 3-4 other people. End up going to the runoff, end up having someone in the general election, and that's how I kind of end up in this seat. So it was not someone that was looking to be in politics, really someone looking to make change in their community. And so when I first got in, everyone said it was going to be tough. It's the swamp there, it's muddy, all those things. But my first couple of years, I really thrived. And one thing that I could accredit to that was playing or organized sports my whole life, right? So you think about a football team in college, there's 100+ people on that team, right? We all have different walks of life, different economic statuses and things of that nature. So I kind of got along with people in the legislature fine, and I played sports and football. And so it was like people wanted to gravitate towards a football player who kind of just got done playing football, right? And so through those experiences, I was able to really thrive in the legislature. And being in the minority is tough, right? But when you're kind of a minority and then you're in a minority, you just kind of try to figure out how you can be beneficial, how you can play your role, how you can be a team player, how you can find those little things that you can be successful in. And so that's how I started off. I didn't start off like, it's different when you're a Republican, you're coming in and you're thinking about to change the world. Because one thing I know about the institution, it doesn't matter if you are Republican, Democrat, if you're new and you're trying to change the structure that's going on in the legislature, it goes against you, right? So that is something that I kind of just learned and picked up on early. And so more of my struggle has just kind of been these last recent years, under the leadership of Donald Trump. I just think that for Alabama, we're like when Trump, said that he wanted to run for office, or Trump is trying to rally people, Alabama is the first place he comes. So we see a lot of that partisan politics. We see a lot of our colleagues coming with these, asinine bills, the Gulf of America, or, we see all of these different bills that they try to pass. So we are the circus for the national level. And so it is, for me, seem like we're not getting a lot of things done because we're trying to kind of appeal to that national politics. But all in all, I would say that 90% of the things that we do in Alabama is bipartisan, but that 10 is really heavy partisan on both ends, and really on the Republican end, because we don't really have the numbers to push any of our really agenda in Alabama on the Democratic side.
Yeah. So, what are the couple places where you've been able to either find common ground or ignore some of the craziness or whatever in order to try to serve your community or the state?
Yeah, so in 2020, the governor started a commission. It was called Innovate Alabama. So we were tasked with fostering innovation technology in Alabama and kind of being the Silicon Valley of the South. And so the governor reached out to Dr. Condoleezza Rice. She's a native from Alabama, but she's over there at Stanford, and she does stuff with fellows, business fellows, and things of that nature. So we were able to create a 100-page plan and put policy into place so that way we could take advantage of industry coming in, business startups, and things of that nature. And so that has really paid great dividends. One bill that I was able to pass, myself, that I was kind of did in a bipartisan way was STTR and SBIR. These are kind of like grants for startups. And so we know that on the state level, this is already a matching thing on the state level. I mean, on the federal level. But on the state level, Alabama didn't have that, but North Carolina did, Georgia did. So I was able to bring a bill that was basically a supplemental fund for startups. So if I'm a business and I'm coming to Alabama and I'm saying that I'm pro-Alabama and that I want to do business in Alabama and I want to get a grant for research and development, and I'm going to commercialize and I'm going to actually bring workforce into the state, then you could get up to, when you combine the state and the federal dollars, almost $3 million. So I think on the state level, you could get about $1.5 million, and I think you can get some additional money on the federal level. So that was a bipartisan piece of legislation that Bill Poole, he's the finance director now of the state, but at that time he was a state representative. He had a bill, I had a bill. We both introduced them together. We both co-sponsored those bills. They made it through both the House and the Senate, and we're seeing thousands of jobs being created and millions of dollars being put into Alabama. And then when we think about, everything that happened with the sudden cardiac arrest with Damar Hamlin, that was something that I was able to pass in a bipartisan way as well. And even think about the yoga bill. I mean, it took at least, when we think about, at that time, it was only like 28 Democrats in the House. You need about 53 to 54 votes to pass a bill. So like half of those people that voted for the yoga bill were Republicans. And so there are things like that. There are things like, the quantum evaluation resolution that I put in place, HJR 181, to create a task force to look at quantum computing and quantum in its entirety for the next 10 years. So there are things that I get done. I think it was one year I passed a bill like every year, right? Like it was something that I passed every year. And so a lot of times when you are in the minority, I talk to, some of my colleagues from some states, they never can pass a bill. Either they either introduce a bill and it never makes it to the light of day, or their counterparts on the Republican side hijacks their bill. In the next session, they pass the bill. So I can say that even though I'm in Alabama, we do have a working relationship where not a lot of times there's not a lot of bill jacking. It happens sometimes, but I think we do respect each other to a certain degree.
How do you think about making your state competitive and then also making sure that those technology jobs and other jobs, are equally distributed across the state and to rural and underserved communities?
So a part of one of the bills, it was like creating an Innovate Alabama Incorporation, right? So they have board of directors, they hired an ED. So a part of that legislation we put in, you have to engage HBCUs. You have to engage rural Alabama. You have to make sure that it's equitable throughout the state. You can't just target the Birminghams and the Huntsvilles and places of that nature. So it is really drawn out. in the bill, in that particular bill, on how we're going to look at the whole scope of Alabama. And then they brought amendments to actually really incentivize businesses that do things in agriculture, healthcare, and rural places. So it's an extra tax incentive for that as well. And then when we look at the quantum computing task force, some of the language is the same, right? We have to engage HBCUs. We have to engage rural Alabama. We have to engage people of color. And so we do make sure that that's one thing that, is the hardest job in Alabama. We always have to fight for diversity. Every bill, every task force, every commission, we always have to put language in the bill, because if we don't put language in the bill, and you have our politics is not only divided by R's and D's, it's also divided by black and white. 99% of the Republicans are white, right? Most of them are white men, right? We have one Republican black man, right? And then all of your deals, for the most part, are black, right? And so there's an underlining fight that I see. It's not just D's and R's, it's also black and white. And if you got your Democratic caucus is all black people, of course we care about black issues because we're black, right? And of course, if your counterparts that are in the majority are all white, maybe they're not sensitive to some of the diversity, right? And so you have that plays a part in it. So we always have to go to leadership. We always have to go to the mic and bring amendments around diversity and just implement diversity into bills. Because if we don't, our counterparts won't think about it.
Right. How do you think about, you've been in this fight for 7 years now. Obviously have tons of talent outside of politics. How do you think about where you're going to spend your time and make your impact going forward?
Well, right now I'm just concentrating on, doing my job and really making it to the next election, because the 2026 election is coming around. It's going to be a doozy in Alabama. We have Tommy Tuberville, football coach at Auburn University, then now is the U.S. Senator of Alabama. He's now running for governor, and he's raised almost $6 million in a couple of months. And so we're just going to see a lot of partisanship that's going to happen. So I have to kind of make sure I protect my seat, because you never know who wants to run for your seat. But as we kind of think about, I think that most Democrats, or if you're in the minority, right, your job is kind of to be the conscience of the legislature, right? Like, we understand that, the Republicans here, they can steamroll us, they don't need us, but there are things that we do that really add value to the experience that otherwise we wouldn't hear. We wouldn't be, that conscious that's saying that, look, you need to look at this, you need to do that. And I think that our colleagues appreciate that. Because sometimes when you're running rapid and you have all these people with steak knives and telling you that you need to do this, sometimes you need that, that caucus of a few to tell you need to slow down. You need people to go to the mic and filibuster and slow bills down, because, even though R's and D's, we fight and all that, we also get along to the degree that sometimes we stop our Republican colleagues from doing something that they don't want to do. Right. So they need someone to give them friction, so it can be kind of like, WWE, WWF, we make it look good. We're fighting. The Democrats stop this. But, it was already kind of orchestrated from the beginning. We do not want this bill. We do not want to name the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. It doesn't make sense financially. We have to change everything in Alabama. It's going to cost us more money. And so a part of the job is to do that. And then a part of the job for me is just to understand, where am I starting to develop things that I have a niche for? And then one day, if I feel like this is no longer something I want to do, how do I give impact somewhere else, right? So for me, I have an executive MBA, I have a degree in sports management, but one thing that I've been intrigued to do is kind of get into corporate law and things of that nature. So for me, it may be, a next career may be being an attorney, right? It may be being, doing government affairs. It may be being an agent for NIL athletes, right? But you kind of get a lot of experience being in the legislature, because you're task of learning so many things, right? You're not deep in depth in all these things, but you may know about 50 different issues, but you can't go talk an hour about each one, right? And so this is really something that expands the mind, and it does really pay great dividends if you say, I don't want to do this no more, that you have added value that you can take into the world. So that's kind of the things that I really look at. How can I contribute to the overall apparatus, either in my position, or if I say, I don't want to do this anymore, how can I still be impactful?
I have no doubt you're going to be incredibly effective. We look forward to keeping you in the New Deal. I look forward to seeing you at the future New Deal conferences. I'm going to ask you all about my Oregon football and get your thoughts on that. But thank you for joining us today. It's been actually amazing, and these stories are just so engaging and inspiring. Your fight that you're engaging in there.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.